isn't enough to fire that tore starting at $9.99 a month. There were some heart-stopping moments during a massive fire that tore through a house in New Jersey. It happened in the town of Sayreville, where 4 people, including 2 young girls and an infant boy, were trapped inside that house. Look at that smoke. Well, the flames had already spread to the front door when police arrived.
I tried to get up the stairway, but it was fully engulfed. There was no way getting up there. Looked at the people who were getting the ladder, then looked up in the air, and she was already jumping. So, as she was on her way down, I thought...
Wow. Well, luckily, they all did manage to make it to a bathroom window, and they jumped out of that window to safety. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured. The cause of that fire still under investigation.
So the head of the European Union saying that national borders are, quote, the worst invention ever. Jean-Claude Juncker says that he wants to open all of the borders between the countries in Europe, this despite a flood of refugees from the Middle East and the recent terror attacks in Germany, France, and Belgium. Joining me now with his thoughts on this, John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN and a Fox News contributor. Good to have you here this morning, sir.
Good morning.
So what do you think about those comments?
Well, cue up the John Lennon music. Look, what you're hearing here is the essence of the European Union theology, that war in Europe was caused by nation states. The way you eliminate war in Europe is eliminate nation states, and it's one reason, I think the most profound reason, why the British just voted to leave. They actually like their country and would prefer to keep it rather than see it in a borderless Europe like Juncker's imagining. But the practical consequences really do, though, go to day-to-day security for average Europeans. With this flood of refugees covering so many terrorists, with the terrorist attacks we've seen, a borderless Europe looks a lot less attractive today than it did back in the dreams of the founders of the EU.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the sentiment in Europe is going in the actual opposite direction of what he's talking about. Is that your sense, or is that just what we, sort of what we read about how people are feeling in Europe?
No, I think that is an increasing mood in the public as a whole. It's certainly been spurred by the refugee flows, but it's been building for a long time, and it goes to the basic flaws in the European Union project. This is a top-down initiative driven by people who have concluded on an ideological basis that a Europe without nation states, making a super-state out of all of Europe, will stop war on the continent, and that's what they're about. And it's failing in many respects. It's failing because the euro, the common currency, is failing. It's failing because people are rarely consulted about what they think of this project, and when they do in referenda in country after country, they tend to vote against it. So when you add on the terrorist problem, the terrorist threat caused by the refugee flows, it's no wonder it's coming to a boiling point.
You're also, of course, sensing these themes in the election process here at home as well, and Donald Trump talks a lot about the fact that you can't be a country unless you actually have borders. And here's a little piece of one of his ads that goes to that.
In Hillary Clinton's America, the system stays rigged against Americans. Syrian refugees flood in. Illegal immigrants convicted of committing crimes get to stay, collecting Social Security benefits, skipping the line. Our border open, it's more of the same, but worse.
Similar theme from what you're seeing debated in Europe, right?
Well, I think there are two things going on. One, inside Europe, which has never been a nation state like the United States, they're as much worried about, as they used to say in Britain, the plumber from Poland, as they are coming from people from outside. This is not fundamentally a racist argument. This is an argument about jobs and the economy. But now on top of that, there really are security concerns, as we've seen from attack after attack, of people from outside of Europe entirely. The Middle East has wanted to move to Europe for 1,000 years or so. They're having pretty spectacular luck these past few years.
So in terms of Juncker, what's his future, and is there traction to his statement, or, is he isolated within the EU and the other sort of heads of those states?
Well, let's be clear what he is exactly. He's the president of the European Commission. That is to say, he is the top bureaucrat in the European Union. He represents nobody except the bureaucrats in Brussels. And it's this kind of extraterrestrial statement by him and other Eurocrats, as they're called, that has helped fuel the anti-EU sentiment within all the member states to a lesser or greater extent. And to me, it highlights the virtues of just good old-fashioned representative government. Before you put somebody in a position to say something like that, you ought to see if he can get elected by real people outside of his native country, Luxembourg.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting to watch the different elections in Europe and this theme and how it plays out. I remember, the new mayor in Rome won in part based on the fact that she wants to sort of crack down on refugee infiltration into Italy. When you look at these elections, Sarkozy has now announced that he's going to run again in France. What kind of impact do you see on the elections in Europe from this?
Well, I think it's going to be very significant. Sarkozy, who was thought to be finished in politics, is now coming back, waging, as he did earlier in his career, effectively a law and order campaign. And he has said very expressly that if